We don't know when human life begins. Well, that's an intellectually dishonest lie.
Well, this argument that we don't know when life begins is not an argument based on any biological facts.
U.S. Senate report states, physicians, biologists, and other scientists agree that conception marks the beginning of the life of a human being, a being that is alive and is a member of the human species. There is an overwhelming agreement on this point in countless medical, biological, and scientific writings.
I mean, we have a situation where we have politicians who go up and they quote things from the 13th century, you know, saying they don't know when life begins. I mean,
oh yea, oh yea, oh yea. All persons having business before the Honorable, the Supreme Court of the United States are admonished to draw near and give their attention, for the court is now sitting. God save the United States and this honorable court.
I find nothing in the language or history of the Constitution to support the court's judgment. The court simply fashions and announces a new constitutional right for pregnant women. Justice Byron R. White.
What they would see if you compared the mother's genome and DNA with the embryos, even at that very earliest stage, you'd see that these were two separate and distinct individuals.
If you go to all the textbooks, you will find that they will resoundingly tell you that yes, when you have those 46 chromosomes, when you have that gender now identified, when you have that self-defining and self-propelling embryo, that is the beginning of human life.
Biology is very clear on when life begins. It's at conception. The heartbeat in a developing human usually starts at about 23 to 25 days, barely past 3 weeks in development.
You have to remember that I then was in the abortion clinic telling other women that it was a blood clot, yet going back in the back room to make sure all the body parts were there as early as 6 weeks.
And we need to start using words that are true instead of using euphemisms to cover things up. Product of conception. Blob of tissue. Brother, you're a blob of tissue. I'm a 250-pound blob of tissue. Every human being on the face of the earth is a blob of tissue. But that begs the question, are we going to protect that blob of tissue, or are we going to allow it to be destroyed indiscriminately?
More than a decade ago, a Supreme Court decision literally wiped off the books of 50 states statutes protecting the rights of unborn children. Abortion on demand now takes the lives of up to 1.5 million unborn children a year. Human life legislation ending this tragedy will someday pass the Congress, and you and I must never rest until it does. Unless and until it can be proven that the unborn child is not a living entity, then its right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness must be protected.
And the founders of the Constitution said, in order to secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, we do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. The primary purpose of the Constitution was to protect generations yet unborn and give them the blessings of liberty.
The right to life is in the 5th Amendment and the 14th Amendment to the Constitution. Nowhere is there a right to abortion. So the judges usurped their role as protectors of the Constitution when they created a right that was never intended to be in the Constitution. Judges on the Supreme Court and at many levels of the judiciary have become corrupted by the power to interpret the Constitution. They now believe, and they have admitted in their judicial opinions, that the Constitution means what they say it means, and they can mean whatever they want it to mean.
Planned Parenthood is one of the biggest distributor of birth control devices, but these birth control devices fail 2 million times a year in the United States. And so what we see, according to the Alan Guttmacher Institute, which is a research arm of Planned Parenthood, is that nearly 2 out of 3 women obtaining abortions were using contraception when they got pregnant. So it's kind of a self-fulfilling, wonderful way to sell a product, then have the product fail, and then offer people abortions to cover up for the failure of your own product that you just sold them.
We had a whole plan that sold abortions, and it was called sex education. break down their natural modesty, separate them from their parents and their values, and become the sex expert in their life, so they turn to us. When we would give them a low-dose birth control pill they would get pregnant on, or a defective condom, because we didn't buy the most expensive condoms, we bought the cheapest condoms. Our goal was 3 to 5 abortions from every girl between the ages of 13 and 18.
They get the children young, they get them sexually active. They say if they can only get a girl about at 16 to have an abortion, they got her for 3 or 4 more, because she'll remain sexually active. They give them contraceptives. They get the cheapest brand of everything, and yet they put on this front that they're helpful, and they've got everybody fooled.
We gave them a low-dose birth control pill that in order to provide any level of activity had to be taken at the same time every single day. The girl wouldn't take it accurately, and if you miss that thing, the protection is out of her system. The sexual activity goes from 0 or once a week to 5 to 7 times a week. She doesn't take the pill properly, she gets pregnant. And who does she call when she's pregnant? She calls us. We're the experts. And we were ready. We used a script designed to overcome every single objection. That's what sales is. Overcome the objection and you get the order, in this case, the abortion. And when she calls, the first question is reassure. And so the girl confesses, I think I may be pregnant, and the counselor, who's really a telemarketer, that's all they're trying to do, sell over the telephone, but we call them counselors, says, we can take care of your problem, no one needs to know. And then the first question, what's the first day of your last normal period? And she gives this so-called counselor the date, and she says you're 8 weeks pregnant. She didn't say you might be 8 weeks pregnant. She didn't say you could be. She said you are 8 weeks pregnant. So she has planted the first seed in this long marketing thread, and the sad thing is, in this girl's mind, she is the expert. This is the pregnancy expert, and the next question is this good news or bad news? If it were good news, she would not be calling an abortion clinic. It's bad news, and when she replies bad news, this counselor moves right in, because now she wants to identify the fear, to use it to reaffirm that abortion decision anytime that girl moves away. And if she says, well, maybe I need to think about this, your parents will kill you, you'll have to miss drill team, the abortion is sold.
What's in a name? Sometimes people wonder why Margaret Sanger chose the name Planned Parenthood for her organization. Initially, Planned Parenthood was called the Birth Control League. People thought the word control was too intimidating, too threatening. And so they said, let's make it sound like something nice, Planned Parenthood. So when people look for us, they think we want to help them plan something that's good for them. So therefore, we have the name Planned Parenthood. How deceptive.
Margaret Sanger said that she wanted to rid the world of human weeds, and the Nazis said exactly the same thing, life unworthy of life. She was a racist and eugenicist, and the purpose of her organization, which was originally called the American Birth Control League, was summed up by one of its mastheads on the Birth Control Review, which was to breed a race of thoroughbreds. Another one of the mastheads was birth control, a sure light in our racial darkness.
Margaret Sanger, when she started the American Birth Control League and later Planned Parenthood, had an agenda, a eugenic agenda, to quote-unquote get rid of the inferior races.
Margaret Sanger was deeply involved in eugenics in the United States. Parts of the ideas that the Nazis came up with were generated by U.S. and British eugenicists.
In Margaret Sanger's premier publication, which was called the Birth Control Review, they ran articles written by doctors of the Third Reich. We also know that in Nazi Germany there was a Dr. Hans Harmsen who was writing all of the sterilization laws for the Third Reich. And that after World War II, Hans Harmsen was part of the group that started the German affiliate of the International Planned Parenthood.
I'm obviously not only against defunding Planned Parenthood, but I would like to see Planned Parenthood even get more funding, because oftentimes it is both the first and the last resort for health care. So many people are dependent upon Planned Parenthood, and the need is only going to grow. We will have to do whatever we can to provide access to quality, affordable health care that includes the full range of reproductive health, including safe and legal abortion.
This kind of goes on to my next question, which is that we know that women of color often rely more on government-funded health care than do white women. I'm wondering if you can tell me what other steps you could take to make abortion access available to more women of color and women in states where their rights have been curtailed for basically what's a legal medical procedure.
Right, yeah. You know, I was very proud to get the Planned Parenthood Action Fund endorsement. And when I was at the event where the endorsement was announced, I was talking to a lot of the patient advocates, the doctors, the staff, and it's very clear that for women of color, Planned Parenthood is the go-to place.
Most people are familiar with Roe, the case that made abortion possible through the first trimester. It was the case of Doe versus Bolton, centered about Sandra Cano, that made abortion possible through all 3 trimesters. This decision made it possible to kill a fully viable human being up until the very day of birth.
Most people think abortion is legal only to 3 months of pregnancy in the United States, whereas we all know, those of us who are in the business know that this is legal for all 9 months of pregnancy until the very day of birth.
Now, abortions are done through all 9 months of pregnancy, not because of Roe v. Wade, but because of Doe v. Bolton, that said for the health of the mother, an abortion can be completed through all 9 months of pregnancy. But the problem was that health was defined as mental health. And we would say to this scared young woman, you would have problems with this pregnancy should you carry it to term, wouldn't you? She'd say yes, and we'd chart it emotional health.
Planned Parenthood Federation of America locates most of its abortion clinics in minority neighborhoods. Planned Parenthood does most of its abortions on minority women.
Sarah Weddington and Linda Coffey had to have a pregnant woman who would sign the form, who would sign on the dotted line. I'm not an Ivy League person, never have been. When I came along, I was just like the prize they had waited for. You know, I was illiterate, you know, I wasn't, I was more self-contained than I was about the world. I mean, I was trying to live each and every day, and they knew that. And they took full advantage of it.
But I think all of this was underhanded. I went to her innocently. I didn't have money. I needed a divorce, and I wanted my 2 children home. She had put the point to me, if a woman and a man work, should they not be able to make the same amount? They did the same job. To me, that made sense, and I said, sure. I had no knowledge that this was to do with abortion or trying to legalize abortion.
I went down to Linda Coffey's office. I was trying to read what I was signing. And they said, oh no, don't worry about it. We're your friends. We're going to help you. I never had to go to any of the court proceedings. The only thing I did was sign the piece of paper that brought Roe versus Wade into being.
Something that uses lies, coercion.
The #1 slogan for abortion is pro-choice. And the ironic thing about that slogan is that when you ask women who had abortions, why did you have that abortion? The #1 response is, I felt that I had no choice. A majority, maybe upwards of 80% of abortions in America happen with some form of coercion.
I had this one lady that called me one afternoon, and she said that she wanted to make an appointment for her daughter to come in and have an abortion. I said, does she want to have the abortion? Well, you know, it's not her choice.
Saying I needed to have an abortion, and then this was not a good thing for me to do, and it wasn't going to be good for my kids. Then I told my fiance, then I told my mother, then I told my other family members. All of a sudden, everybody's like, you can't do this, you can't do this, you don't want to do this is not good for the kids, this is not good for you, this is not good for our marriage, I don't want to raise this child.
An abortion, it's not about choice, it's about despair. It's not about people who are getting abortions because of freedom of choice. It's about people getting abortions because they feel they have no freedom and no choice.
Through conversations with him pushing the abortion, and then that kind of frustrated me at some point. I just felt, I don't know, I just felt like he didn't care about me, that he was just thinking about, like, let's fix this. That's exactly his words, we need to fix this.
That I was in fear and in crisis, and at that point that I felt like I had no choice.
Women feel threatened that if they don't have an abortion, their lives will be punished for it.
I was dating a young man, and we got pregnant. And the first words out of his mouth to me were, "You're not having it, are you?"
And I remember that sinking feeling in my heart, and I thought, well, no, I guess not. And I felt so much pressure.
Absolutely do not think that my choice was a choice. I think it was, like I said before, I think it felt like an ultimatum.
They're all screaming at me. It felt like they were screaming at me. They were constantly insisting, you've got to kill him, you've got to abort him, you can't do this, you've got to go to the clinic, you've got to hurry up. Every week that you wait is making it worse. Go, 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 go. So I guess I have to bear this burden so that everybody else can be okay.
We remembered what our girlfriends looked like before and after.
Because abortion goes to the core of who we are as women, and the fact that we are involved in nurturing life, that an abortion experience really does leave a mark.
There's something that happens to a woman's mind once they pass what I call that fine line.
Abortion is so shameful and secretive that many women don't tell anybody that they've had an abortion.
They won't say anything for 20, 30, 40, 55 years, sometimes on their deathbeds. Nobody knows because they're so traumatized. Silence.
It can also have psychological effects, short and long term, for the woman.
We have more and more men and women who've had abortions are speaking up about it, and as they testify to the pain and the despair that abortion has brought, as they testify to the fact that abortion didn't solve their problems but only created more of them, then they are, by their very testimony, they're making it impossible for the other side to say, listen to the voices of women, this is a positive thing for women.
Why do so many women, including myself, have dreams about their children? And especially in my situation where I didn't think of it as being a child, but I had nightmares and dreams about children.
I know a lot of women have suffered from having nightmares, hearing babies crying in the night, inability to bond with living children.
The fear of being found out. What if people knew what you've done? Or people think you're a godly woman, but they have no idea that you've killed 4 people. Grief and the shame just about buried me at times.
After I left there and went home, I guess it was the hormones or whatnot set in, and just the emotions, the reality of what all happened. And I remember just curling in a corner and pulling out my hair and just thinking, I can't believe I had done this.
Rather than just go through a 9-month crisis pregnancy, that I've gone through about 20 years of hell on earth, just by exercising my right to choose.
Women are constantly said, they didn't tell me I'd suffer for years from my abortion. They didn't tell me I'd have nightmares about my baby. They didn't tell me I'd come to regret it so deeply that I would rather kill myself than go on living. Nah, it's 10 minutes, you'll never have to think about it again. That's a lie.
I figured the only way to escape the torment was to take my own life. And being the chicken that I was, I got about as high as I could, and I got in my bathtub filled with water. And with the razor blade, I cut my wrist. And I began to just lie there and watch the water in the tub turn red.
I was diagnosed with clinical depression in 1991. I'm sure it came from the abortions. I became extremely suicidal after my abortions. To the point where I did attempt to take my own life a couple of times.
We had a 12-year-old. She came in chewing her gum and looked so carefree. She had her abortion. She came back 2 weeks later for her checkup. Didn't come out of the room, opened the door, and she was in there. She'd brought in a piece of glass and slit in her wrist. 12 years old.
But we all have that moment where we realize that we are moms and we killed our children. It's pretty sick. It's a sick feeling.
Abortion can have long-term consequences on the woman in terms of affecting her fertility.
Many women become infertile. They suffer from other problems with their female organs and end up having to have complete hysterectomies, never able to conceive or have other children. One of our ladies, the The power of the suction machine from the abortion was so severe that it caused her fallopian tubes to collapse and she was never able to have children.
I wasn't in for all of that abortion. Somebody else was in there with him. But I went in toward the end and I'd never seen that much blood. I mean, you know, just blood everywhere. And we put her in the recovery room and she just filled the bed. And we changed the bed a couple of times and her blood pressure was erratic and the doctor left. I was really worried about her and I tried to call him. And her boyfriend kept wanting to go home and her blood pressure stabilized a little bit, but I just didn't believe she was, you know, it's just like that feeling you have that she's not right. At 10 o'clock, the boyfriend said, look, if there's anything happens, I'll call you immediately. And at 4:30, he called the doctor and he didn't take the history and he said put her in a tub of hot water, and when he did, the last little bit of blood in her body ran out. And he called me about 6 and said she's dead. And he immediately started telling me how he was going to do the cover-up. And somehow it all worked out and the autopsy didn't show anything and no charges were filed and nothing happened. The newspapers didn't call, nobody came. We killed that woman and did abortions the next morning.
And many times you'll see a young lady who's been killed by abortion, and on the death certificate you see something like spontaneous gangrene of the ovary or therapeutic misadventure or something like that.
The families are so hurt by what's happened and shamed that their daughter had this abortion and died from it or whatever. They don't come forward.
You see, abortion makes a doctor almost lawsuit-proof because the woman is so ashamed that she went to get an abortion that even if he butchers her so that she has to have a hysterectomy, they aren't going to say anything to anybody about it, nothing, because they don't want anyone to know.
We had one girl, 22 years old, a model, who danced in, jumped up on the table, laughed at the doctor that she didn't wear underwear. She was 22 weeks pregnant. We put her on the table. Now, there's a maneuver called the Hansen's maneuver. Now, the doctor may do it himself or someone may do it, but I did it for the big baby, 2 of our big baby abortionists. I held the babies and you say the head's here, the feet are here, the buttocks are here, and you gently push the baby down into the instruments. And the first time this doctor went in, he pulled out omentum. That's the lining to the intestines. He literally perforated her uterus and was pulling her bowel out her uterus with the very first time he went in with the instruments. And the second time he went in, he pulled out her bowel and he pushed it back in. Live baby, woke the woman up, put her in my car because it's terrible advertisement to think about having an ambulance in front of an abortion clinic. You just don't want it. So we put her in my car, and we didn't take her to the hospital nearest us. We didn't take her to the hospital that would take the best care of her. We took her across town to a hospital that would help us cover up what we'd done. And this surgeon has taken this girl who has a perfectly complete baby inside her with her bowel pulled out her vagina upstairs to the operating room. 7 doctors operated on that baby, on that girl. They had to do a colostomy to resection her bowel to empty into this bag. They pulled the baby out. He rolled it into the disposable drapes and put it into the incinerator at the hospital. All 7 of those doctors falsified the records. We killed that baby that way. The doctors falsified the records. We told that girl she had an abdominal pregnancy, and she didn't sue us.
There were 2 great lies about abortion. 1, it's not a baby, and 2, it's good for women.
I don't think anyone ever believed that we would see an industry develop that's largely a cash industry, that is largely unregulated, to perform abortions.
And they're using our tax money. 1/3 of their $1 billion budget is our money.
They have worked very hard to learn how to get Medicaid funds, and they want to increase their tax funding to $700 million a year.
Planned Parenthood was allowed to come in and talk to us, or other organizations talk to us. Liberal teachers talk to us during sex ed. No one called it a baby. Product of conception. It can be removed if you don't want it.
There was a receipt on the chart. They would collect them, bring them up at the front at the end of the day. We would balance them, pay them in cash, no 1099, no W-2. But I'm certain people killing babies for a living probably reported it to IRS, don't you think?
We will never know for sure how much money is made because the abortion industry hides behind the skirts of their patients in declaring medical privacy.
It's a business, and we can't deny that fact. That's what gives it a certain amount of coercive and secular power. The money that is generated by abortion then gets plowed back into the political realm to support candidates who will keep it going.
When an organization makes millions upon millions of dollars on providing abortions, and sometimes in a community they're the sole proprietor, they've got a monopoly on it, why wouldn't they then encourage more abortions? Because more abortion means more money. More money means that they can go back to the government coffers in the case of Planned Parenthood and say, look at all the good we're doing. And so they can ask for more government money.
Planned Parenthood is expanding now. They're building gigantic abortion clinics in anticipation of socialized medicine because they hope that if a Democrat becomes a president of the United States, there will be socialized medicine brought in, and then they can charge between $1,000 to $1,500 for even first trimester abortions and have them all paid for by the government.
As a state senator, Obama opposed a law to provide equal treatment for children born alive after a failed abortion. In Congress, Obama supported a law to block parental notice. As president, he signed Obamacare, the biggest ever expansion of tax-subsidized abortions, even for abortions just because the baby is a girl.
Look, in my mind, reproductive care is essential care. It is basic care. And so it is at the center and at the heart of the plan that I've proposed. We also will subsidize those who prefer to stay in the private insurance market, except the insurers are going to have to abide by the same rules in terms of providing comprehensive care, including reproductive care.
The abortionist has a financial interest in the woman having an abortion because he gets paid if she has an abortion. He doesn't get paid if she doesn't. Now, what do you think he's going to tell her to do?
Very quickly, it was no longer about selling abortions to other women. It was about money. I saw the potential to make great money. I answered the phone at home at night so we wouldn't miss an abortion. But she is allowed to watch her pregnancy test turn positive or negative, and they would point to a chart on the wall and say, this is a positive test and this is a negative test, and if it's positive, we trained our people to reach over and grab the bony part of her elbow and squeeze. And you see, she's confused. She's hurting. She's just gotten this news that she's pregnant, and she's upset. So you grab the bony part of her elbow and squeeze to get her attention and say, if you have your money, we can take care of this right now.
They told me if I didn't have it that day that I would have to come back and it would cost more money because I was right at the 13-week point.
You see, we knew if she went home and talked about it, her support system might help her and might tell her abortion wasn't the answer, but if she just did it right then, it was taken care of. But a certain percentage of those pregnancy tests are negative. They're not all positive. And remember, it costs the same amount of money to get a non-pregnant one in as it does a pregnant one. So if her test was negative, we had a different sales technique. We said, this test is negative. But you know, this test is not sensitive enough to pick up a very early pregnancy. You could still be pregnant and this test would be negative. And you want to know for sure today, don't you? And she would say yes, and we'd say, okay, we have another test we can do. We will just do this sonogram. And we put her on that table as I could put any man, woman, or child on that table. And I could find a pregnancy. You see, all you have to do is find a blob, and everyone's abdomen has a blob. And this girl doesn't know what a pregnant uterus looks like versus a negative one, so you just find a little blob in the abdomen. You flip it around and say, see there it is, you're pregnant. She's shocked. You grab the bony part of her elbow and say, if you have your money, we can just take care of it today.
I mean, the studies are there that shows that abortion is bad for women's health, emotional, physical health. But yet those studies keep getting stifled. They keep getting questioned. They keep getting undermined because of the fact that there is a great deal of money made in the abortion industry. You know, and that money that the politicians are getting from NARAL and NOW, you know, the different pro-abortion organizations, Planned Parenthood, Marie Stopes International. I mean, that is money that is funding campaigns and is supporting candidates. You don't go against that money. You don't speak against it.
A man had come come to our table. I had an exhibit booth, and I was explaining to him the work that we do, and he looks up at me and tears are streaming down his face, and he was sobbing like a baby, and he says, it's been 35 years, and I still hurt every day from it.
We can't be silent anymore. Millions of women's lives have been devastated, and the fathers, we just write them off. They're just forgotten about.
But I'm telling you, the multitudes of people that have been hurt by abortion, it's just unfathomable.
I've had more experience than I'd like to have ever had on the dirty, filthy conditions inside of abortion clinics. When we were in Southern California, we would chase these little rotten abortionists around LA and San Diego and Orange County, and they would set up in these little strip malls, literally sign a lease today and be killing babies tomorrow. We would go and dig in their trash cans, and they would take the cash receipts and throw them away, and the babies would just be thrown in with the daily trash, obviously violating all the health codes in the book.
Our complication rate at the end of my time, last 18 months, was when about 1 out of every 500 had a major life-changing surgery or died. We had one woman die. But because there are no real statistics, and if you can cover it up, you don't report it, and none of ours were ever reported. So we don't really know.
Some of the conditions we send our operatives in, and I've been in there personally, you'd see literally blood on the floor, blood on the walls, you know, cockroaches and mice feces. Some of these places, you wouldn't want to get your hair cut in these places, let alone have a very invasive surgical procedure.
The big hospital in Dallas will tell you, the doctors will tell you that they saw botched abortions or see botched abortions all the time. One of the reasons we were able to regulate the abortion clinics in Texas was because of the bad abortionists that had been reported.
This is a tremendous victory, and we will go forward in making sure that all of the laws that are blocking women's access to the constitutional rights will be overturned.
But no one talks about what happens inside the abortion clinic. And everyone fights. It's the most chaotic place you can imagine. The doctors fight, the nurses fight, everybody's taking drugs, everybody's drinking, it's, you know, they're having affairs.
This movement is surrounded by so many lies and distortions and obfuscations that the vast majority of people haven't the slightest idea what an abortion is.
But it's pretty gruesome to look at that baby and see that it really is a human being. And, you know, no different from you or me except in size.
I recognized I'd been involved in the death of 35,000 babies. The murder of one woman who bled to death from a second trimester abortion. 19 women who'd had hysterectomies or colostomies. And never had one appeared in the newspapers, no lawsuit. But the thing I couldn't deal with was the fact that I had taken the life of my own child by abortion. You can't deal with death and lies on a daily basis without being greatly affected by it. And nobody worked in that clinic that didn't go to the back and put babies' parts together. And even if you didn't put the parts together, there were times when you walked back there and they were on a towel.
The result was a tape of a fetus being attacked by the abortionist from below while we filmed from above. In other words, at the top of the uterus. And the results of this film were so ghastly and hideous. It actually showed the fetus being torn apart in living color. This was not ultrasound black and white, but this was living color.
Delivering a head is very, very difficult, even at, say, 20 weeks. I mean, I had one abortionist keep a girl on the table for 6 hours trying to crush a head. He couldn't do it.
I felt them taking parts out of my body. You know, I've spent the better part of 20 years trying not to remember that, but I do. Nobody knows what goes on in the abortion clinic.
If there's a woman that's considering abortion, that to not buy that lie, that they will miss the greatest blessing of their life.
When I share about what I've done, It's with the hope that I can reach one woman with the truth about abortion so she will not make the same choice I did. That she will not buy the lie. Sadly, I think if at any time one of their fathers had asked me not to abort them, I would have definitely kept that baby.
I carried my baby to full term, and I gave her up for adoption. And I'm happy that I did.
Is that abortion is really, to me, the ultimate exploitation of women. And none of that is being discussed, because the reality is once it starts being discussed and we really blow the lid off of this issue, and the truth has really come out about what abortion does to women, let alone the unborn baby, our dead babies, it will be over.
Their attacks on reproductive rights
are attacks on our human rights.
My rights. Your rights. Everybody's rights.
We've got to put a stop to this.
We've got to take back what's ours.
We've got to draw the line.
And we are.
Every day.
Every day.
Every day.
The Center for Reproductive Rights fights for women worldwide.
We're in the courts shutting down government's attacks on women and their doctors.
We're at the United Nations leading the charge to expand the rights of women around the globe.
To protect everyone's right to make our own decisions about our reproductive health and future.
To keep religion out of the debate about reproductive rights.
And to keep politicians out of our doctors' offices and out of our private lives.
We're fighting for fundamental human rights.
I am pro-rights.
Women's rights.
Reproductive rights. Human rights.
Join us.
Join us.
Join us.
A lot of people want intact hearts these days because they're looking for specific nodes. And then, like I said, always as many intact livers as possible. People just want
livers.
Some people want lower extremities too, which that's simple. I mean, that's easy. I don't know what they're doing with it. I guess they want muscle.
Yeah, a dime a dozen.
How long after can you get pregnant again?
2 days.
I actually am trying to get pregnant.
Okay.
I just want to terminate this pregnancy because of
But no,
the gender.
Like I said, because don't tell us that.
Friend I'm with, she I implied my reasoning and she got a little, I don't know, uncomfortable.
Everybody has their own reasons, and it's like it's none of anybody else's business. So.
Good afternoon. This is Autumn.
Hello, Autumn. I'm interested in making a donation today.
Fantastic.
What about abortions for the underprivileged minority groups? I want to specify that abortion to help a minority group. Would that be possible? Like the black community, for example?
Certainly.
Okay. So the abortion could be, I could give money specifically for a black baby. That'd be the purpose.
Yeah, absolutely. If you wanted to designate that you wanted your gift to be used to help an African American woman in need, then we would certainly make sure that gift was earmarked specifically for that purpose.
Great.
Hello, this is Irene.
Hi, I'm interested in making a donation. I'd like to fund one abortion.
Okay.
I was wondering if that would be possible.
Yes, we can definitely put that.
Can I make the donation specifically for a minority group?
Like a specific group of color, or like a group of...
I mean, like, I want the abortion to be for an African-American baby.
Okay.
And I was wondering if that could be possible.
The exact amount we charge right now is $450 for an abortion.
Okay, $450.
And we can definitely designate it for an African American.
Wonderful. If I wanted to help fund multiple abortions, could you also specify that this could be done for a specific group? Great. And the less blacks out there, the better. So.
Yeah, it's a strange time for sure.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Thank you so much, and you'll receive the check in a few days.
Kind of rate-limiting step of the procedure is calvarium. Calvarium, the head is basically the biggest part. Most of the other stuff can come out intact.
Right.
We've been very good at getting heart, lung, liver, because we know that. So I'm not going to crush that part. I'm going to basically crush below. I'm going to crush above, and I'm going to see that get out intact.
I'm pleased to announce that the Government of Canada will be investing $650 million in sexual and reproductive health programs for women over a period of 3 years. women should be able to choose when they want to start a family, how big their family should be, and who they want to start that family with. My friends, our ambitions can't be bounded by our borders. Women and girls around the world are counting on countries like Canada to help lead the way.
You want the court, including the justices that you will name, to overturn Roe v. Wade, which includes, in fact states, a woman's right to abortion.
Well, if that would happen, because I am pro-life and I will be appointing pro-life judges, I would think that that will go back to the individual states. That'll happen automatically, in my opinion, because I am putting pro-life justices on the court.
Donald has said he's in favor of defunding Planned Parenthood. He even supported shutting the government down to defund Planned Parenthood. I will defend Planned Parenthood. I will defend Roe v. Wade, and I will defend women's rights to make their own health care decisions. And we have come too far to have that turn back now.
You have been quoted as saying that the fetus has no constitutional rights. You also voted against a ban on late-term partial birth abortions. Why?
Melissa, your mother had an abortion during her pregnancy with you, and you survived it. When I was 14, I found out the truth about my life. That's when my survival came to light. When I first found out, I was devastated. And that night I struggled with anger for the first time. My mother, who was a college student at the time, was 19. She wasn't married to my father. She was almost 8 months pregnant with me, from what we can gather. She went into the hospital and had a saline infusion for an abortion done. The saline infusion abortion involves injecting a toxic salt solution into the amniotic fluid surrounding that preborn baby in the womb. And the intent of that salt solution is to actually scald the child to death from the outside in. I soaked in that toxic salt solution for 5 days. My mother went back to the hospital, had her premature labor induced with me, and that was the day my mother was meant to give birth to a dead child. The medical professionals initially believed that the abortion had succeeded in ending my life. The joy for me is realizing that that day when I was left for dead in the hospital, a nurse heard me. That nurse and that team of professionals understood that my life was worth trying to save. I want everybody to see that. If we look behind words, if we look behind numbers, this is what abortion looks like. This is what tens of millions of other children would look like in one way, shape, or form, if only they were given the opportunity to live.